He called her a nobody in front of everyone. He laughed as his mistress dripped champagne on her dress, telling her she didn't belong. He said he was divorcing her to marry someone with power. What he didn't know as he stood in that glittering ballroom was that his simple wife was the secret heir to a European throne. And the important investors he was trying to impress. They worked for her father. The doors were about to open and his entire world was about to end. The first lie was the apartment. It wasn't hers. Of course, Julian Thorne didn't know that. He just thought it was a charming, if tragically small, pre-war apartment on the Upper East Side. He thought the modest inheritance Sarah Jensen lived on was just that modest. Tonight the apartment felt smaller than ever, suffocating under the weight of Julian's ambition. "Sarah, are you even listening?" Julian snapped, not looking up from his phone. He was already in his custom-tailored Brioni tuxedo, a stark, handsome shadow against the cream-colored walls. "I am." Serafina Nocera kept her voice soft the way he preferred. She was fastening the clasp of a simple pearl necklace. "You said the Metropolis Heritage Ball is critical for the new fund." "Critical? It's everything." He finally looked at her and his lip curled just slightly. She saw it. He thought he was being subtle. "Is that what you're wearing?" She looked down at her dress. It was a deep emerald green vintage, elegant and deliberately understated. "It's a classic." I thought, "It's fine, Sarah, just fine." He sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. "It's just, tonight I'm closing the biggest deal of my life. I'm securing final stage funding for Thorne Global Capital. I need to look like I have a lioness, not a, well, just try to stand near the back, all right? And please don't talk to Mr. Duval. I'll handle him." The barb hit its mark as it was intended to. For 5 years, Serafina of Valoria had lived as Sarah Jensen. She had left the cold marble halls of her father's palace in Valoria, a tiny, fiercely wealthy principality nestled between France and Switzerland. She had left her title, her security, and her name, all for one naive dream to find someone who would love her, not the crown. She had met Julian at a Sotheby's auction where she was working as a junior curator for the Sullivan Gallery. He was magnetic, ambitious, and seemingly enchanted by her knowledge of art and her grounded nature. They married within a year, and for the last 6 months he had been a different person. He was cold, dismissive, and constantly on his phone smiling at texts from V. "I know I'm not what you're used to, Julian," she said, testing the water. "These society women. But I love you." "I love you too, Sarah." He said the words as empty as the champagne flute he'd left on her antique dresser. "Now let's go. Victoria Vance is hosting the pre-gala reception and I can't be late." He didn't offer her his arm. He just walked out the door expecting her to follow. She took a deep breath, looking at the small frame photo on her nightstand. It was of her and her father, King Alistair II, dressed in hiking gear on a mountain in Valoria long before she'd begun this experiment. "Just one more night, Papa," she whispered. "One more night." The Grand Astoria Hotel was a riot of flashing bulbs and shouted names. Julian naturally was in his element. He strode onto the red carpet, flashing a $1,000,000 smile, his hand possessively on Sarah's lower back. It wasn't affection. It was a prop. He needed the image of a happy marriage even as he was dismantling it in private. "Julian Thorne over here," a reporter from Tatler called out. "Julian, darling, you made it!" A voice like shattered glass cut through the noise. "Victoria Vance." She was poured into a dress that was more diamonds than fabric, her arm linked with a minor scandal-plagued British aristocrat. But her eyes were only on Julian. She glided over, completely ignoring Sarah, and placed a kiss directly on Julian's mouth. It was brief, but it was not friendly. It was a brand. "Victoria," Julian said, his voice a low purr. He didn't pull away. He didn't introduce his wife. "Isn't this just magical?" Victoria beamed, her eyes finally landing on Sarah. Her gaze raked over the vintage dress with blatant disdain. "Oh, hello, Sarah. What a quaint dress." Did you borrow it from your grandmother's closet? Before Sarah could respond, Julian laughed. He laughed. Victoria, you're wicked, he said, squeezing her hand. Come, I need to talk to you about the after-party. He walked away. He left his wife standing alone on the red carpet as the cameras flashed, capturing her humiliation. She stood there for a full 10 seconds, the world a blur of white light and popping sounds. He laughed. That was the moment the glass in her heart didn't just crack. It pulverized. She composed her features, gave a polite icy nod to the bewildered reporters, and walked inside. The ballroom was magnificent, a sea of gilded architecture and crystal chandeliers. But Sarah saw none of it. She saw Julian and Victoria in a corner, huddled together, his hand on her waist. They were laughing. Sarah got a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and moved to the edge of the room. She would endure. She would get through the night, go home, and then she would have to decide. Well, if it isn't little Mrs. Thorne all alone. Victoria was back this time without Julian. What do you want, Victoria? Sarah asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Oh, just to offer my condolences. It must be so hard trying to keep up. Victoria swirled her champagne. You see, a man like Julian? He's a predator. He needs a partner who can hunt with him. You, my dear, are prey. You're domesticated. And you're not. Darling, I'm the lioness, Victoria purred. He just told me. As soon as his deal with the Europeans closes tonight, he's dropping you. He's upgrading. Sarah's blood ran cold. He said that word for word. Victoria smiled, a cruel, triumphant slash of red lipstick. And he sealed the deal. She held up her hand where a new blindingly large diamond sat on her right ring finger. A welcome gift. He's just so generous. Sarah didn't say anything. She just turned and walked away, heading for the ornate marble terrace. She needed air. She was suffocating. She stepped out into the cool November night, the sounds of the city far below. Her hands were shaking, not from sadness, not anymore, from rage. She pulled her own phone from her simple clutch. It was an old nondescript model she used for one purpose. She speed-dialed a single number. It was answered on the first ring. Gideon? Her voice was no longer the soft, breathy tone of Sarah. It was crisp, cold, and full of authority. Your Highness? The voice on the other end was deep calm. Are you compromised? I am disappointed. She said the code word for a situation that had become intolerable. My Odysseus protocol is broken. The experiment is over. There was a pause. Understood. Shall I retrieve you? She looked back through the glass doors. She could see Julian now standing with a group of men, including the one he'd pointed out as Mr. Duval. He was holding court, the king of his own tiny, fraudulent world. No, Seraphina said, a new hard resolve in her voice. I am not retreating. I am advancing. Gideon, execute protocol Nemesis. A beat of stunned silence. Your Highness, that protocol requires... I am aware of what it requires. I am aware of the consequences. Do it. And Gideon, Majesty, bring the car, the official one. And I think it's time you made the other call. Yes, to my father. When she walked back into the ballroom, the change was so subtle that no one, least of all Julian, would have noticed. But it was there. Her back was straighter. Her chin was higher. The Sarah Jensen, who had been trying to blend in, was gone. The woman who re-entered the room was a princess of Valoria, and she was done playing. She moved through the crowd, a ghost in an emerald dress. People parted, sensing a shift in the atmosphere around her. She didn't stop until she was standing directly in front of Julian and his circle of potential investors. And so, with this final infusion from Mr. Duval's group, Julian was saying, his voice booming with false confidence, Thorne Global Capital is poised to dominate the European tech market. Julian. Her voice cut through his speech like a diamond on glass. He turned, his smile freezing. Sarah, I told you to wait. Mr. Duval, gentlemen, my apologies. Your wife is here to ask you a question, Julian. Her voice was not loud, but it was so clear and cold that the entire group fell silent. The music seemed to dip. What are you doing? He hissed, grabbing her arm. She pulled her arm away smoothly. I was admiring Victoria's new ring. She looked directly at Mr. Duval, a distinguished man in his late 50s. She told me Julian gave it to her. As an upgrade. Julian's face went white, then blotchy with red. Sarah, you're making a scene. Am I? Serafina asked, her voice laced with ice. You were the one who told me that diamond necklace you bought last week was an investment. I just didn't realize the investment was her. She pointed. Across the room, Victoria was preening, showing off a spectacular diamond necklace to a group of socialites. The same necklace Julian had sworn was for a client. The investors, including Mr. Duval, were now watching intently. This was no longer a party, it was a spectacle. Julian, cornered and panicking, did what all cowards do. He attacked. A scene! He roared, his voice suddenly loud and cruel. You want a scene? Fine. You're right, I'm done. I'm done with you. He jabbed a finger at her. Look at you. You're nothing. You're a leech. You're a small, simple-minded girl from a no-name family who got lucky. You're a dead weight, Sarah. A collective gasp went through the onlookers. I am destined for more, he shouted, his eyes wild. I am building an empire. I need a partner, not a parakeet, Victoria, he jest. She's a lioness. She understands power. You just understand how to spend my money on ugly old dresses. Serafina didn't flinch. She just stood there, letting him empty his arsenal. So yes, he spat, moving in close, his voice a venomous whisper. It's over. As soon as my deal is signed, I'm filing for divorce. I'm upgrading, and there is not a single thing you can do about it. He smiled a terrible, triumphant grin, believing he had won. He turned back to the investors. Gentlemen, my apologies for that domestic interruption. Now, Mr. Duval, about the term sheet. Mr. Duval did not look at Julian. His gaze was fixed over Julian's shoulder at the main ballroom doors. His expression was not one of disgust or even interest. It was fear. Mr. Thorne, Duval said, his voice a dry rasp. I don't think I am the man you should be speaking to. Julian frowned. What are you talking about? I mean, a new voice said, that you should probably be talking to me. Julian turned. Sarah did not. She just smiled. Gideon was standing there. He was no longer in the simple black suit of a driver. He was in the formal dark blue uniform of the Valorian Royal Guard, his chest adorned with a single silver medal. He was flanked by two other men built like mountains with earpieces and impassive faces. They were not hotel security. They were military. Gideon, Sarah said, her voice warm for the first time all night. You're late. My apologies, Your Highness, Gideon said, bowing his head deeply. The traffic was uncooperative. Julian's mouth opened and closed. Your Highness Sarah, what is this? Did you hire actors? This is insane. Gideon ignored him, stepping aside to reveal the now open ballroom doors. Mr. Thorne, Gideon said, his voice booming with baritone authority. May I present His Majesty King Alistair II of the Royal House of Valoria. The entire ballroom went silent. The music, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, it all died, sucked into a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. Through the doors walked a man who did not just command a room. He owned the very air within it. King Alistair II was tall, with a mane of distinguished silver hair and a bearing that spoke of centuries of command. He was not in a tuxedo. He was in a bespoke suit of such dark, expensive material that it seemed to drink the light, his lapel adorned with the unmistakable jeweled insignia of the Order of the Valorian Griffin. He was flanked by 4 more guards, their suits bulging with equipment, their eyes scanning the room with terrifying efficiency. Behind him was a small entourage of men and women in severe business attire who fanned out and immediately began speaking quietly to the hotel's general manager and the head of security. The ambassador from France, who had been laughing by the bar, choked on his champagne and performed a half bow. A British duchess, known for her snobbery, actually curtsied. This was not business royalty. This was actual royalty. King Alistair's eyes scanned the room, bypassing the fawning socialites and stunned billionaires until they found his daughter. He walked forward. The sound of his leather-soled shoes on the marble floor was the only sound in the 5,000-square-foot ballroom. He walked past the horrified Victoria Vance. He walked past the frozen, gaping Julian Thorne. He stopped directly in front of Serafina. A flicker of warmth entered his stern blue eyes. He took her hand, the one that wasn't wearing Julian's ring, and brought it to his lips, bowing his head. "Serafina," he said, his voice a quiet rumble that nonetheless carried to every corner of the hall. "Are you all right, Moje Serche?" "My heart." Serafina curtsied. Not the bobbing dip of a socialite, but the deep, graceful, and practiced reverence of a princess. "I am now Papa," she said. The blood drained from Julian's face. He looked at Sarah. He looked at the king. He looked at Serafina. And he looked at Mr. Duval, the man he'd been begging for money. Mr. Duval, the stern investor, had moved to the king's side and was now bowing. "Your Majesty," Duval said, "a pleasure as always." "Mr. Duval," the king said, his voice now flat and cold as a glacier. "My head of North American operations for Valorian Holdings. I trust the trip from our Zurich headquarters was pleasant." "It was Your Majesty," Duval said. Julian made a small choking sound. Valorian Holdings, the mysterious European conglomerate he had been chasing for a year, the whale that was going to make his company. He looked at Serafina, his simple wife, the wife who worked in an art gallery, the wife who spoke 5 languages, the wife who had a knack for finance he had always dismissed as cute. "You," he whispered, pointing a shaking finger at her. You were Valorian Holdings." Serafina finally turned to look at him, and it was the look of a queen staring at an insect. "No, Julian," she said, her voice clear and caring. "I am not Valorian Holdings. Valorian Holdings is the private equity firm that manages my family's money. The money you have been desperately trying to get your hands on. The investors you've been lying to, they are my father's employees." The king stepped forward a single menacing step. He was a foot taller than Julian and radiated an aura of absolute power. "Mr. Thorne," King Alistair said, his voice dangerously level, "you were seeking a capital infusion. You were wooing my chief financial officer," he gestured to Duval, "and you were divorcing my daughter in public." The revelation hit Julian not like a wave, but like a physical blow from a cannon. The woman he had, the power he wanted, the money he needed. It was all her. It was always her. The woman he had just publicly, cruelly, and irrevocably discarded. Her royal father entered the ballroom, and the cheating husband fell to his knees. It wasn't a metaphor. His legs, which had been shaking, gave out completely. He stumbled, catching himself on a chair before sliding to the marble floor, his $5,000 tuxedo pooling around him. Your Majesty," he babbled, his hands outstretched. "Princess Serafina, I didn't know. It was a mistake, a joke. It was a joke. A joke." Serafina repeated the words, tasting like ash. "You called me a dead weight. You called me nothing." "No. I love you," he cried, crawling on the floor. "I've always loved you. Please, Serafina, tell them. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." Serafina looked down at the pathetic, broken man groveling at her feet. The man she had loved. The man who had been her husband. "Gideon," she said, her voice sharp. "Your Highness." "Victoria Vance." Serafina pointed to the socialite who was trying to melt into the wall. "She's wearing a new ring and a necklace. The necklace in particular." Gideon's eyes narrowed. He recognized it. "I believe," Serafina continued, her voice projecting for the entire room, "that you will find the necklace is a custom piece from the Maison de Valoria Royal Jewelers. Specifically the Star of Eldoria set." She looked at Victoria, who had turned a shade of white that matched the tablecloths. "Its serial number is V1138, and it was reported stolen from our family vault in Zurich last week." Victoria let out a small shriek. He gave it to me, I didn't know. He said it was a gift." "Oh, I'm sure he did," Serafina said. "Julian has a habit of giving away things that don't belong to him." She turned her gaze back to her husband. "Didn't you, Julian?" Julian was now hyperventilating. "Stolen. No, I bought it from a private dealer, a very reputable dealer." "A dealer!" The king interjected, his voice booming with wrath. "Who has been under surveillance by Interpol for trafficking in stolen artifacts. My artifacts." "You thief!" "Gideon," Serafina said. "Please inform the NYPD, who I believe are waiting downstairs, and our friends at Interpol. We have found their thief and his accomplice." "Accomplice!" Victoria screamed as two of the Valorian guards moved to block her exit. "He told me he loved me. He told me he was leaving her for me." "And what a prize you've won," Serafina said dryly. Julian scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild with terror. "You can't do this. I have a company, I have assets. I'll sue." This time Mr. Duval laughed. It was a short, sharp, brutal sound. "Sue Mr. Thorne. With what?" Duval stepped forward, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. "Thorne Global Capital. An impressive name for a company that is in essence a house of cards." He tapped the screen. "You've been over-leveraged for 18 months, Mr. Thorne. You've been funding your lavish lifestyle, the cars, the watches, the gifts for your mistress by taking on more and more debt." I have investors," Julian stammered. "No, you don't," Duval said. "You have one investor, one sole debt holder who has been quietly buying up all your debt, propping you up, waiting for this very moment." Julian's eyes widened in dawning horror. "Who?" Duval smiled. "A small anonymous holding company registered in the Caymans, which is in turn a wholly owned subsidiary of Valorian Holdings S.A. He turned the tablet to face Julian. "We own you, Mr. Thorne. We have been the only thing keeping you from bankruptcy for a year. We were waiting for a signal from Her Highness." Serafina gave a small, cold nod. "And," Mr. Duval said with immense satisfaction, "we just received it, as of 9:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All your credit lines are frozen, all your assets are seized, and we are calling the note in its entirety, effective immediately." He tapped the screen one last time. "You are not just a social pariah, Mr. Thorne. You are bankrupt. You nothing." Julian looked at the tablet. He looked at the king. He looked at Serafina. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His entire life, his company, his reputation, his future had been erased with a single tap on a screen. He fell back to his knees, a hollow, broken shell of a man. The ballroom, which had been a cathedral of silence, erupted into a frantic buzz of whispers. Victoria Vance was being spoken to by two uniformed NYPD officers who had been discreetly let in. Julian Thorne was just kneeling. His head hung in abject defeat. King Alistair put a protective arm around his daughter's shoulder. "Gideon, bring my daughter her coat." "Yes, Your Majesty." Gideon returned not with the simple cloth coat Sarah had arrived in, but with a magnificent full-length cape of dark Valorian velvet embroidered with the royal crest. He draped it over her shoulders. The transformation was complete. The emerald green dress, once so quaint, now looked like the attire of a wood nymph who had been hiding a dragon's power. "Come, Seraphina," her father said gently. "You have been Sarah long enough. It is time to come home." She nodded, taking his offered arm. They began the long walk to the doors, a king and his heir, the crowd parting before them like the sea. But as she reached the door, Seraphina stopped. She turned back. The entire room, full of the most powerful people in New York, held its breath. She looked at the stunned faces, the reporters scrambling for their phones, the socialites who had whispered about her. "For 5 years," she said, her voice clear and strong, no microphone needed, "I lived among you as Sarah Jensen. It was an experiment. I wanted to see if I could build a life, a real life, and find someone who would love me for me. Not for a title, not for a vault in Zurich." She looked directly at the broken man on the floor. "I failed, but I learned." A new strength filled her. "I learned that a title does not give you power, it gives you responsibility. And I learned that the name I tried to hide, the name Sarah Jensen, is not a name of shame. It is the name of a woman who learned to survive." She turned to her father. "Papa, the Allister Foundation was this evening's primary sponsor, was it not?" The king nodded. "It was." "Our donation," she announced to the room, "will be doubled." A stunned, then enthusiastic round of applause started. "However," she held up a hand, silencing the room once more, "it will be administered through a new special fund which I will personally oversee." She smiled a true bright smile. "We will call it the Sarah Jensen Fund, and it will be dedicated to providing legal and financial support for women who are trying to rebuild their lives after being deceived by men of unscrupulous character." It was a final, perfect, devastating blow. She had not only destroyed her enemy, she had built her legacy on his ashes. Without another word, Princess Seraphina of Valoria, flanked by her father, the king, swept out of the ballroom, leaving chaos and a beautiful, hard-earned lesson in karma in her wake. The double doors of the Grand Astoria ballroom hissed shut behind them, cutting off the explosion of noise as if a vacuum seal had been engaged. The pandemonium, the shouts of "Your Majesty," the frantic clicking of 100 phone cameras, the first wail of Victoria Vance as an NYPD officer touched her elbow was instantly muffled, replaced by the hushed, sterile quiet of the marble corridor. Seraphina felt like she was floating. Her hand was steady on her father's arm, but her legs felt distant, as if they were moving on memory alone. She had been Sarah Jensen for 2053 days. In the last 10 minutes, that woman had been field-stripped, dissected, and immolated on a pyre of public humiliation and royal revelation. Gideon, his face an impassive granite mask, walked 2 paces ahead. 4 other Valorian guardsmen Seraphina had known her entire life formed a perfect silent diamond formation around her and the king. They moved with an oiled, terrifying efficiency, parting the stunned hotel staff who had flattened themselves against the wallpaper. "The car is prepared, Your Majesty." Gideon said, his voice a low rumble. They swept through the private lobby past a secondary security team that was holding back a new frantic wave of paparazzi who had somehow gotten the tip. The flashes were blinding, a strobing epileptic assault, but Seraphina kept her chin high. She saw his face in one of the flashes, Julian's, a mask of abject pleading terror. Then the doors of the limousine, a custom-armored Mercedes Maybach, shut with the heavy, definitive thud of a bank vault. Silence. The car did not move. It sat in the concrete bay, a black, bulletproof bubble of calm amidst the storm. Seraphina stared at her hands, which were folded in her lap on the velvet cape. "Seraphina." Her father's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. The king was gone. Papa was back. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice thick with a rage he was only just containing. She thought about the question. Hurt. The last 6 months. The lies. The laughter. The coldness. The casual cruelty of his words, a dead weight, a nobody. Yes, that had hurt. But the woman it had hurt was gone, burned away in the ballroom's bright lights. "I am awake," she said finally, her voice raspy. She turned to look at him, and for the first time he saw not his daughter, but his heir. "I am so incredibly awake." A single hot tear traced a path down her cheek, not of sadness, but of sheer unadulterated relief. She wiped it away with the back of her hand, and her fingers brushed against the simple 2-carat diamond ring Julian had given her. The one he had called tasteful and appropriate for her. She looked at it, this symbol of her failed experiment, this monument to her own naivete. With a cold, deliberate motion, she pulled it off her finger. It left a pale, indented mark on her skin. She didn't look at it for more than a second. "Gideon," she said, her voice clear. The partition separating them from the driver's seat slid down. Gideon, who was in the passenger seat, turned. Serafina held the ring out between 2 fingers. "Please have this analyzed. I want to know if the diamond is as fake as he was. And then—" She paused. "Have it melted down. The gold can be donated." Gideon took the ring without a word. "As you wish, Your Highness." He slid the partition closed. King Alistair watched the exchange. A slow, proud smile touched his lips. "So," he said, "it is over. We go home. The jet is waiting at Teterboro." The limousine finally pulled out, gliding into the New York traffic with the silent, menacing grace of a shark. Serafina watched the city lights blur past the tinted glass. Home. The palace. The cold marble halls, the polite bows, the suffocating safety. "The experiment is over, Papa," she agreed, her voice hardening. "But I am not going home." He frowned. "Serafina, I don't understand. You are safe now. This nightmare is finished. Julian Thorne will be a stain in the history books, nothing more. My lawyers will—" "Your lawyers?" she interrupted, turning to face him, the full force of her presence filling the small space. "Your lawyers will do nothing. My lawyers will." Alistair sat back, stunned into silence. "You sent me here for one reason, did you not?" She continued, the words coming fast, sharp, and precise. "You told me, to rule you must first learn to serve. To lead you must first learn to be invisible. I was to be Sarah Jensen Jr. curator for 1 year, to understand the common person, to learn the value of work. I stayed for 5. Do you know why? You fell in love," he said, his tone softening. "No," she said, her voice like ice. "I fell for a projection. What I actually fell in love with was work. I loved having a purpose that I built myself. I loved being judged on my merits, not my name. And I'm good at it, Papa. I am very good at it." The car was speeding down the FDR drive, now its escort vehicles forming an impenetrable wall. Julian's public humiliation. That was just the appetizer. The man is not just a cheater, Papa. He's a fraud, and he's a sloppy one. Mr. Duval, she said, her eyes flashing, is a steward. He's a brilliant accountant. He protects the family's assets. But he is not creative. He is not a killer. He has been managing this situation. I'm going to end it. The king was speechless, a rare and beautiful state. You put Mr. Duval in charge of Valorian Holdings' North American operations. As of tonight, as of right now, I am taking his job. The car pulled to a stop on a private Teterboro tarmac, its nose pointed at the sleek white silhouette of the Royal Valorian, Griffin 1. "Serafina," her father said, his voice now one of command. "That is a $50 billion portfolio. It is not a toy for you to use for revenge." She did not flinch. "He called me a dead weight. He called me a parakeet. He said I was nothing. He built his entire company, Thorne Global Capital, on the lie that he could secure funding from us. He used me, his simple wife, to try and get proximity to Duval. He used my name, my trust, and my love to build a house of cards. Revenge. This isn't revenge, Papa. This is a hostile takeover. It's business. Gideon opened the door. The cold night air hit her. She stood on the tarmac, the wind whipping her velvet cape. She looked at her father, who had followed her out. "I am not getting on that plane to go home," she said. "I am getting on that plane to use it as my new office. We are not flying to Valoria. We are flying to a secure holding pattern over the Atlantic while my new team assembles." Gideon. "Your Highness." "Secure the Valorian Royal Suite at the St. Regis. I want Mr. Duval, the entire legal team from Cravath, Swain, and more, and a full forensic accounting squad from Deloitte. I want them there in 3 hours. We will land at dawn." Her father stared at her, the wind ruffling his silver hair. He saw no fear in her eyes, no sadness, only a terrifying, focused, and righteous blaze. He had sent his daughter to learn to be a commoner. She had returned a queen. He nodded a single sharp motion. "Gideon, you heard the princess. Make it happen." He turned back to Serafina. "But I am staying with you, as an observer." "Of course, Papa," she said, a small dangerous smile on her lips as she ascended the stairs to the jet. "I'll need someone to fetch the coffee." The first shell hit at 500 a.m. just as the sun was painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray. It was not a legal filing. It was not a phone call. It was page 6. Ballroom blood knee. King's crasher. Simple wife is secret princess. In a scene that insiders are calling the most dramatic public takedown in New York society history, tech bro Julian Thorne, founder of the embattled Thorne Global Capital, was royally, and we mean royally, dethroned. At the Metropolis Heritage Ball, Thorne was overheard viciously dumping his quaint wife Sarah in favor of socialite/vulture Victoria Vance. One problem, simple Sarah, is actually Her Royal Highness Princess Serafina of Valoria, heir to the throne, and more importantly to the multi-billion-dollar Valorian holdings. Thorne's entire company has been desperately seeking an investment from, you guessed it, Valorian. Eyewitnesses report that just as Thorne called his wife a dead weight, the ballroom doors opened, and in walked His Majesty King Alistair II himself, flanked by guards. The man didn't just kneel, one duchess told page 6. He melted. It was delicious. He literally crawled. The night ended with Thorne in a puddle and Vance in handcuffs, arrested in connection with the theft of the priceless Star of Eldoria necklace. A palace source confirms the upgrade was in fact stolen property. Ouch. By 7:00 a.m., Forbes had dropped the financial hydrogen bomb. Thorne Global Implosion Valorian Holdings calls 1.2B. Debt note. Stock to zero. Following the shocking social circuit implosion of its founder Julian Thorne, Global Capital ceased to exist this morning. Valorian Holdings S.A., which had been quietly buying up Thorne's substantial debt for the past 18 months, confirmed it has called the entire note effective immediately. A spokesperson for Valorian, which manages the private wealth of the Valorian royal family, stated, "Due to a catastrophic failure of leadership and credible allegations of criminal fraud, we have moved to protect our interests. All assets of Thorne Global Capital and Mr. Thorne personally have been frozen or seized." The market, which already had doubts, reacted instantly. The stock is worthless. Julian Thorne, who was worth an estimated $800 on paper last night, is as of 7:00 a.m. in debt. By 9:00 a.m., the royal suite at the St. Regis was a war room. The opulent Louis XVI-style furniture had been pushed to the walls. In its place were trestle tables, laptops, and massive wall-mounted screens displaying spreadsheets, market data, and legal documents. Serafina stood at the head of the table. She was not in a ball gown. She wore a severe black custom-tailored suit, her hair pulled back into a tight, unforgiving knot. The only jewelry she wore was a simple Valorian signet ring. Mr. Duval, looking like he hadn't slept in a year, was pointing a laser at a screen. "And it's worse than we thought, Your Highness. He wasn't just over-leveraged. He was running a full-blown Ponzi scheme. He was using projected revenue from our potential investment, the one he never had to secure other loans, which he then used to pay off other investors. And as we can see, fund his extracurriculars." A screen flashed showing receipts. $250,000 for Victoria Vance's rent. $1.2 million for a Patek Philippe watch. $80,000 at Le Bernardin in 3 months. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul and using the money to buy Paul a new Ferrari. Serafina said, her voice flat. "Exactly, Your Highness," Duval said, wiping his brow. "We've frozen everything. The bank accounts, the trading accounts, the penthouse, the jet, the cars. We have it all." "Not everything," Serafina said. The room went quiet. She walked to a separate screen, one she had been curating herself. "He had an art collection," she said. "One he was very proud of. He loved to tell me how uneducated my taste was. He loved to teach me." On the screen, a list of artworks appeared. A small bronze, a mid-century abstract, a series of classical sketches. "His taste," Serafina said, "was as fraudulent as his balance sheet, but it's valuable. We liquidate it, all of it." "Your Highness," a lawyer from Cravath spoke up, "that is his personal property. Seizing it to cover the corporate debt will be complex. He can fight it in court." "He can't," Serafina said, "if he doesn't technically own it." She tapped a file. A new name appeared. "Mr. Eris, the Sullivan Gallery." Duval looked confused. The gallery where you worked, Your Highness. The one on 57th Street. "The very one," Serafina said, her eyes turning to chips of ice. "The one place that was mine. The one part of my Sarah life that I thought was real." She turned to the room. "Julian didn't just betray me in our home. He betrayed me at my work. Mr. Duval, why can't we find the source of funding for his art purchases?" It's a shell, Your Highness," Duval stammered. "A blind trust in the Caymans. We can't pierce it without—" "You don't need to," Serafina said. "I know the account. It's ASG Holdings, Eris Sullivan Gallery. Julian wasn't just buying art from the gallery. He was buying art through the gallery. He was funneling money from Thorn Global into the gallery's holding company, which then sold him art, often fakes, or pieces at a 5,000% markup to clean the money. He made my boss, Mr. Eris, his personal launderer." King Alistair, who had been silent in the corner, let out a low, dangerous growl. "Your Highness," the lawyer said, his eyes wide. That is a massive criminal allegation. That's RICO. That's wire fraud. That's everything." "It's leverage," Serafina corrected him. "And I'm going to use it. Get a team ready. We're going to pay a visit to my old boss." The Sullivan Gallery was exactly as she'd left it, quiet, sterile, and smelling faintly of lemon oil and old money. Mr. Eris, a small bird-like man in a bow tie, was fluttering anxiously by his desk. When Serafina walked in, flanked not by royal guards, but by 2 terrifyingly expensive lawyers from Cravath, he nearly fainted. "Sarah," he chirped before his brain caught up. I mean, Your Highness, goodness. The news, I am simply, a princess. Here, all this time." "Cut the act, Aris," Serafina said, her voice echoing in the small, silent space. She walked past him, her heels clicking on the polished hardwood, and stopped in front of a small bronze sculpture of a dancer. "The Koutalides bronze," she said. A rather good fake, isn't it? Eris's blood ran out of his face. I don't know what you mean. It's been authenticated. It's a replica of the piece in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, Serafina said, not even looking at him. A lost original you claimed. You sold it to Julian Thorne 3 months ago for $2.5 million. It was a private sale completely above board, Eris squeaked. Was it? Serafina turned. And the $2.5 million, did it come from Julian's account? Or did it perhaps come from Thorne Global get funneled into the ASG Holdings account you use for acquisitions, and then you sold him the statue keeping 20% for your troubles? Eris opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I told you it was a fake, Eris, Serafina said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The day it arrived. I told you the patina was wrong and the casting marks were consistent with a 20th century mold. I told you. And you told me I was a diligent assistant and to log it anyway. He made me. Eris finally burst, tears welling. He knew about my debts, my gambling. He said he would ruin me. He said this was just creative financing, a tax write-off. He made you a money launderer, Eris, the lawyer said, stepping forward. And by extension, you helped him defraud investors, the SEC and the IRS. Eris sank into his chair, a broken man. What do you want? Serafina looked at the man who had been her boss, her friend. The man whose betrayal cut almost as deep as Julian's. You're going to do 2 things, she said. First, you will provide full written testimony of every single transaction Julian Thorne ran through this gallery. You will give my lawyers the account numbers, the dates, and the emails. You will, in effect, be the chief witness for the prosecution in the U.S. Attorney's case against him. And second, Eris whispered, terrified. Second, Serafina said, you will resign, effective immediately. You will sell this gallery. You will give my lawyers the list of every client you have ever defrauded with a fake, and you will use the proceeds of the sale to make them whole. Whatever is left, I don't care. Go and be a greeter at a casino. You will never work in the art world again. It was a fate worse than prison for a man like Eris. It was a reputational execution. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Good, Serafina said. She walked to the door, then paused. And Eris, you will hand over the Koutalidis bronze and the rest of Mr. Thorne's collection. It's all evidence now. 1 month later, Serafina stood in a private skybox at Sotheby's. She was on the phone with Mr. Duval. Yes, the Q4 projections for the Zurich office look soft, but no, I am not coming home. I will handle it from New York. Yes, I am aware. Thank you, Mr. Duval. She hung up, exasperated, just as her father entered the box with 2 glasses of champagne. You are terrorizing him, you know, Alistair said, handing her a glass. I am motivating him, she said, taking a sip. There's a difference. Below them, the auction floor was electric. It wasn't just an estate sale. It was the social event of the season. The press was packed in the back. Every socialite collector and ghoul in New York was present. The event, the Thorne Collection, sold by order of Valorian Holdings and the U.S. Marshals Service. And now Lot 45, the auctioneer announced, a collection of 12 bespoke Brioni suits, who will open the bidding for me at $1,000. They are liquidating his life, Alistair mused. They are repaying his victims, Serafina corrected. Every penny from this auction goes to the Employee Pension Fund and the smaller investors he defrauded. The Sarah Jensen Fund is matching the first $1 million. They watched as his Patek Philippe, the one from the Le Bernardin receipt, sold for half what he paid. His cars, his watches. Piece by piece, his entire identity was being dismantled and sold for parts. Then the climax of the evening. And now, Lot 112, the Star of Eldoria necklace. A gasp went through the room. The piece was brought out on a black velvet cushion. It was magnificent. This exquisite replica, the auctioneer said, causing a confused murmur, was commissioned by a Mr. Julian Thorne, who was then arrested for attempting to traffic what he believed to be the real artifact. It is nonetheless a stunning piece of jewelry. We will open the bidding at $5. In the skybox, Alistair turned to his daughter, his eyebrows raised. Serafina smiled. Julian was so arrogant he thought he'd stolen the real one from our vault. He was conned by the same dealer who was trying to sell it to him. The dealer sold him the high-grade replica Interpol has been tracking for years. The real one, she touched her throat, never left Zurich. He was arrested for trafficking a fake, which it turns out is just as illegal. Her father chuckled a deep rumbling sound. He wasn't just a monster, he was an idiot. A fool in every sense, Serafina agreed. And finally, the auctioneer said, his voice softening, we have a very special final lot, lot 113. A single mannequin was wheeled to the center of the stage. On it was a simple, elegant emerald green vintage dress. The dress of a princess, the auctioneer said, his voice full of reverence. Worn by Her Royal Highness Princess Serafina on the night she reclaimed her name. All proceeds from this lot will go directly to the Sarah Jensen Fund supporting victims of financial and domestic fraud. Serafina's breath caught. She had donated it, but she hadn't expected this. We will open the bidding at $10,000. $50,000, a voice called. $100,000. $250,000. Serafina watched her hand over her mouth as the dress, her simple, quaint dress, was bid up higher and higher, a symbol not of her humiliation but of her triumph. Sold, the auctioneer cried, banging his gavel. $1.5 million, to the gentleman in the back. A round of thunderous applause filled the room. Serafina looked down at the floor, and for the first time she saw not a pit of vipers, but a city full of possibility. Her father raised his glass to her. So, Your Highness, what's next? Serafina turned from the window, leaving the ruins of Julian Thorne's life behind. She picked up her tablet, which was already flashing with new emails from the Zurich office. What's next, Papa? She said, a true bright smile playing on her lips. Now, we work. What did you think of Serafina's incredible transformation? That moment when the king walked in. I just got chills. It just proves that you should never, ever underestimate the quiet person in the room. They might just be royalty in disguise waiting for their moment. And Julian. He learned the hard way that karma always cashes the check. If you love this story of hard karma and secret identity, you are going to love what I have coming next. So do me a favor and hit that like button. Right now, it really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to see a story where the bully gets what they deserve. And most important of all, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a single moment of drama and justice. Trust me, you don't want to miss the story I'm dropping next week. Thanks for listening.
They say to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But what if your greatest enemy shares your bed, your home, and your name? Lily was the perfect wife, the silent partner, the woman in the shadows. Tonight, her husband forced her to be the help. He wanted to humiliate her. He didn't realize he was handing her the exact weapon she needed to destroy him. By the end of the night, the waitress would own the room and the guests would be on their feet. But not for the reason he ever imagined. The crystal glasses felt unnaturally heavy in Lily Thorne's hands. Each one represented a small, crushing weight, adding to the load she'd been carrying for 7 years. The house, her house, or so the deed technically suggested, was ablaze with light and sound, but she existed only in its shadows. Another champagne, darling. A woman with a laugh like breaking glass trilled not at Lily but through her. Lily murmured, "Of course," her voice so soft it was stolen by the jazz music. She pivoted her plain black shoes, the ones she usually gardened in, squeaking shamefully on the polished marble floor. This was Mark's night. Mark Thorne, her husband, the man of the hour, the rising star of Aperture Technologies, the charismatic genius. He was across the room, holding court by the grand piano, his voice a smooth, confident baritone that wrapped around the guests. He was telling the Helios story, again, the story of how he had single-handedly developed the revolutionary AI software that was about to make Aperture billions. Lily's stomach clenched. His story, his genius. An hour ago, this night had been different. Lily had been in her bedroom, putting the final touches on her makeup. She'd chosen a conservative but elegant navy blue dress. She felt a small nervous flutter. She hated these parties, hated the fake smiles, and the way Mark's colleagues looked at her with polite pity, the mousy, uninteresting wife of a titan. But Mark had insisted, "The entire board will be here, Lily. Just try to look presentable." Then the manufactured chaos began. Mark had stormed into the bedroom, his face a mask of theatrical rage. The caterers, can you believe it? They sent the wrong appetizers. The wrong ones, I told them. No shellfish, I fired them. All of them. Lily's heart sank. Mark, no. The party starts in 30 minutes. What are we going to do? He hadn't missed a beat. He'd walked to the closet and pulled out the simple black cotton apron the house cleaner Maria sometimes wore. He tossed it onto the bed. "What is this?" Lily had whispered. "It's a problem, Lily, and you're going to solve it," he'd said, his voice dropping from theatrical to the cold, flat tone he reserved just for her. "We can't look like fools. The bar is set up. The food is in the warmer. You'll serve. You'll be discreet. No one will even notice you." "Mark, I can't," she pleaded, the humiliation stinging her eyes. "These are your colleagues, your bosses. I'm your wife." He'd stepped close, gripping her chin. His signet ring dug into her skin. "No," he hissed. "You're the woman who lives in my house, eating my food. You contribute nothing. Your little computer hobby doesn't pay for this." He gestured around the opulent room. "Tonight you will be useful. You will put this on, you will serve the drinks, and you will not. Say a word. Do you understand me?" She had understood. The threat was unspoken, but clear. The alternative to obedience was a scaled-up version of the punishments she already endured, the silent treatment, the frozen bank accounts, the casual cutting cruelty. So she had put on the apron over her simple black t-shirt and slacks. The navy blue dress was still hanging on the door, a cruel reminder of the woman she was supposed to be. Now she was a ghost, refilling glasses, clearing plates, her eyes fixed on the floor. Mark's rival, a sharp-featured woman named Victoria Vance, deliberately stepped back and bumped into her. "Oh, goodness!" Victoria exclaimed, as a full glass of red wine splashed onto the white rug. "You clumsy girl! Look at this mess!" Lily knelt her cheeks, burning, blotting the stain with a cocktail napkin. "Mark, really," Victoria said loudly. "You should hire professionals. You get what you pay for." Mark drifted over a plastic smile plastered on his face. He looked down at Lily on her hands and knees. "Victoria, I apologize. The help is just so inexperienced." He nudged Lily's shoulder with his expensive Italian loafer. "Get up, Lily. Stop making a scene and get a cloth from the kitchen." He called her Lily. Not darling, not my wife. Just Lily. The name dropped into the room with the finality of a spade of dirt on a coffin. The few guests who overheard it simply assumed Lily was the new maid's name. She fled to the kitchen, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the cloth. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, taking deep, ragged breaths. The mask of calm she wore was cracking. She had been invisible for so long, but this was different. This was erasure. He hadn't just put her in an apron. He had put her in her place. A place so far beneath him that she was no longer even human. She was just the help. She closed her eyes, and for a second she saw a line of glowing green code in her mind. A complex algorithm she'd written last week. A line of code that worked. A line of code that was hers. "Get a grip," she muttered. She splashed cold water on her face, reapplied the mask of servitude, and picked up a fresh tray of appetizers. Mark wanted her to be useful. Fine. She would be useful. But as she walked back into the lion's den, a tiny cold ember of rage, long dormant, finally began to glow. The gilded cage had been built slowly, plank by plank, lie by lie. Lily hadn't even realized she was trapped until the door was locked, and Mark held the only key. They met in college. He was a business major, all charm and dazzling ambition. She was a computer science prodigy, hiding behind thick glasses and a curtain of mousy brown hair. He was the first person to see her. Not the shy girl, but the brilliant mind. "You're a genius, Lily," he'd whispered to her in the university library, looking at a program she'd written for fun, a program that learned and adapted. "You're going to change the world, and I'm going to help you." He became her shield. She hated presenting, hated the spotlight. He loved it. They were the perfect team. He was the face, the visionary. She was the architect, the engineer. He graduated and got a junior marketing job at Aperture. She worked from their tiny apartment coding. Her work was revolutionary. He would take her code, put it into a sleek PowerPoint, and present it as his own. "It's just simpler this way, baby," he'd assured her, kissing her forehead. "The corporate world, it's full of sharks. They'll eat you alive. Let me protect you. I'll handle the business. You just create." So she created. And he rose. The Helios project was her masterpiece. It wasn't just an AI, it was a predictive, self-correcting neural network. It could analyze market trends with 99% accuracy. It was worth billions. It took her 3 years of 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a burning passion for the pure logic of it. Mark presented it to the Aperture board. They didn't just give him a promotion, they practically gave him the company. He was made Executive Vice President of Innovation. They moved from the tiny apartment to the sterile marble and glass mansion, and the lock on the cage clicked shut. The partnership dissolved. Her hobby became a distraction. He took control of their finances. "It's easier for tax purposes, Lily. Let me handle the stress." He discouraged her from seeing her old college friends. "They're just jealous of our success, darling." He needed her to be small. The smaller she became, the bigger he felt. The more brilliant her code, the more he resented her for it. He needed to be the genius, and for him to be the genius, she had to be nothing. The final cruelest twist was her identity. Deep in the 1.4 million lines of Helios's core code, Lily had embedded a digital signature, a tiny, elegant piece of encrypted code that was unmistakably her. It was her one act of defiance, her one secret. She'd named it Codex. Mark, for all his bluster, was a terrible coder. He never would have found it. He'd sold the world a product he didn't even understand. Back in the living room, the party was reaching its peak. Lily moved on autopilot, her feet aching, her mind numb. She was clearing glasses near the fireplace when she heard Mark's voice, raised in false modesty. "No, Ben, you're too kind," Mark said to Ben Carter, a senior board member. Helios was a team effort, but, well, the core algorithm did come to me in a flash of inspiration. 3 a.m, I saw it, the whole structure. I barely made it to the computer in time. Ben Carter, a jowly man with a booming voice, clapped Mark on the back. "Brilliant, Mark. Simply brilliant. You are the future of this company. I keep telling the board we need to lock you down, make you COO. Mark's eyes glittered. This was it. The moment he'd been working for. "I'm just happy to contribute," Mark said, spotting Lily. His eyes hardened. He wanted her to hear this. "Success isn't just about work, Ben. It's about a stable home life. Knowing who is in charge. Maintaining discipline." He beckoned Lily over with a sharp, imperious flick of his fingers. Like calling a dog, she walked over her tray held in front of her like a shield. "My glass is empty," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. He held it out for her to take. He didn't look at her. He just kept talking to Ben. "You see, efficiency. It's all about efficiency and knowing your role." Lily took the glass. Her hand was steady. The glass was empty, but she felt the weight of it, the weight of the apron, the weight of 7 years of lies. As she turned to go to the bar, Mark's rival, Victoria Vance, stepped in front of her. Victoria, who was also a high-level executive, looked Lily up and down with a slow, contemptuous gaze. "You know, Mark," Victoria said, her voice a purr. "I'm not sure about this one." She reached out and plucked the name tag from the breast of the apron. Lily hadn't even realized it was there. It was a generic, "Hello, my name is" sticker left over from some office party. "She doesn't even have a name. You should at least give your servants names." Victoria crumpled the sticker and with a smirk dropped it onto Lily's tray. Lily looked at the crumpled paper. She felt the eyes of Ben Victoria and 6 other executives on her. She saw Mark's triumphant reptilian smile. This was the moment. The floor of the cage had just given way. She was falling, or she was flying. The numbness in her mind vanished, replaced by a crystalline Arctic clarity. The fear was gone, burned away by the cold fury. She looked up, not at Mark, but at Victoria. She smiled. It was a small, tight smile, completely devoid of warmth. "You're right," Lily said. Her voice, though quiet, was perfectly clear. It cut through the music. "A name is very important." She turned and walked away, leaving the crumpled sticker on the tray. She didn't go to the bar. She walked straight to the kitchen, took off the apron, and dropped it into the trash. Mark barely registered Lily's small act of defiance. He was too high on his own success, too intoxicated by the adulation. He saw her walk away and simply assumed she was fetching more ice, like a good, obedient little servant. His attention was immediately pulled to the front door. A hush fell over the room. The jazz music seemed to fade. A new guest had arrived. This wasn't one of Mark's colleagues. This wasn't a board member. This was Julian Vance. Julian Vance was a legend in Silicon Valley. He was the founder and CEO of Vance Capital, the multi-billion-dollar venture firm that had provided the seed money for Aperture Technologies. He was in effect the man who owned everyone in this room, including Mark. He was also, Lily knew with a jolt, Victoria Vance's uncle, though the two famously detested each other. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and eyes so sharp they seemed to X-ray everything they landed on. He did not smile. He simply observed. Mark, seeing his ultimate prize, practically flew across the room, his hand extended, his face split in a sycophantic grin. "Mr. Vance, what an incredible honor. I had no idea you were coming," Mark gushed. Julian Vance looked at Mark's extended hand for a long second before shaking it briefly. "Mark, good evening." His voice was a gravelly monotone. He wasn't here for pleasantries. His eyes swept the room, analytic and dismissive. This is amazing," Mark continued, flustered by the man's cold energy. "Can I get you a drink, food? Let me introduce you to the board." "I'm not here for the board," Vance said, cutting him off. "And I'm not here for a drink. I'm here for a person." Mark laughed nervously. "A person, sir? Well, they're all here, the best and brightest of Aperture." Vance turned his full attention to Mark. The party noise around them seemed to cease entirely. Everyone was watching. "Stop posturing, Mark. It's tiresome," Vance said. "My team has been in touch with your CEO, David Chen. David was supposed to arrange this meeting, but since he's conveniently stuck in Singapore, I've come myself. I'm here to meet Codex." The name hit the room like a sonic boom. Mark's smile froze, cracking at the edges. His blood ran cold. "Codex, sir. Don't play dumb. It doesn't suit you," Vance said. "You're the head of the division. You must know who it is. Codex, the architect of Helios. I want to meet them. Now." Mark's mind was a white-hot panic. Codex. How did he know that name? Lily. It had to be Lily. She had done something. She had talked. "Sir," Mark stammered, trying to regain control. "Codex is just an internal project name. A team mascot, if you will. The work is mine. I am the architect of Helios." Julian Vance sighed a sound of profound disappointment. "You're going to make this difficult, aren't you? I had hoped you were smarter than this. But you're just a suit, a PowerPoint." Vance raised his voice, slightly addressing the room. "My apologies for interrupting the festivities. My firm, Vance Capital, is the primary investor in Aperture, and Aperture's entire future valuation is based on the Helios project." He turned back to Mark. "And the Helios project, as it turns out, is a masterpiece of engineering. My own cybersecurity team, the best in the world, spent the last month trying to find a back door. They couldn't. But they did find a signature. An encrypted digital signature buried so deep in the core code it was practically part of its DNA. A signature that identifies the true creator, Codex." Mark was visibly sweating. That's a security feature. A watermark I designed." "Liar," Vance said, his voice flat. He held up a tablet. The screen showed a complex string of data. "We traced the primary source commits for the core algorithm, the final brilliant stroke of genius. They didn't come from the Aperture mainframe. They didn't come from your office, Mark." He looked around the room, then pointed to the ceiling. "They came from an IP address registered to this house, right here, for the last 3 years. Now I will ask you one more time, and I advise you to think very, very carefully about your answer. Who is Codex?" Every eye in the room was on Mark, his colleagues, the board members, his rival Victoria. He was trapped. The entire edifice of his life, his career, his very identity was about to crumble. He frantically scanned the crowd. He was looking for Lily. He would drag her out. He would force her to deny it. He would say she was a disgruntled wife, that she was crazy, that she had stolen the code from him. But Lily was nowhere to be seen. She wasn't by the bar. She wasn't clearing glasses. She wasn't in the kitchen. He was alone. I don't know what you're talking about," Mark whispered, his bravado completely gone. "Wrong answer," Vance said, his face hardening. He pulled out his phone. As of this moment, Vance Capital is filing an injunction to freeze all of Aperture's assets, pending a full investigation into intellectual property fraud. The board will be notified in 10 minutes. You, Mark, will be named as the primary subject of the investigation. You've built your career on a lie, and I'm going to enjoy tearing it down brick by brick. "No!" Mark shouted a desperate animal sound. "No, wait, please, I can explain. I'm done listening to you," Vance said. "I'm here for the genius, not the thief." "I am right here." The voice came from the top of the grand staircase. Lily stood on the landing. She had changed. The mousy brown hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant bun. The simple black t-shirt and slacks were gone. She was wearing the navy blue dress, the one she'd meant to wear as Mark's wife. But she wasn't wearing it as a wife. She was wearing it as armor. She had no makeup on. Her face was pale, but her eyes, the eyes that Mark had never truly looked into, were blazing with a cold intellectual fire. She descended the stairs one slow, deliberate step at a time. The only sound in the dead, silent room was the click of her heels on the marble. Mark stared, his mouth open. This was not the woman he knew. This was not his mouse. "Lily, what are you doing?" He hissed, a frantic, desperate edge to his voice. "Get back to the kitchen. You're embarrassing me." She didn't even look at him. Her gaze was locked on Julian Vance. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked directly to him, a small, unassuming woman who now commanded the entire room. The guests, executives, board members, rivals parted for her, as if she were royalty. She stopped a foot in front of Vance. She looked at the tablet in his hand. "Your team is good," she said, her voice clear and steady. "But they didn't break the encryption. I let them in." Vance's sharp eyes widened just slightly. "You..." "What?" "The signature," Lily explained. "It's not just a watermark. It's a honey trap, a beacon. It's designed to detect any unauthorized high-level breach. When your team triggered the first protocol, I was notified. I analyzed the intrusion signature. I recognized your team's digital footprint from their work on the OSP framework. I decided to grant them read-only access to the signature file. I wanted to be found." Julian Vance was, for the first time in his public life, utterly speechless. He stared at her. Then a slow, deep smile of pure admiration spread across his face. He had come looking for an engineer. He had found a grandmaster. "My God," he whispered. "It's you." Lily finally turned her head and looked at her husband. Mark was ashen, his body vibrating with rage and terror. "She's lying," he shrieked, his voice cracking. She's my wife. She's unstable. She's trying to ruin me. She doesn't know anything about code. Tell them, Lily. Tell them it's a joke." This was the moment Lily had been waiting for. The moment the cage door was open and her jailer was on his knees. She looked at Mark, her expression not one of anger, but of simple, objective assessment. Like a scientist studying a failed experiment. "For 7 years," she said to the room, "I have been the silent partner. I was the architect, and he," she gestured to Mark, "was the face. I am the woman who wrote 1.4 million lines of code in the server room in our basement. I am the woman who designed the predictive algorithm. I am the woman who built Helios from scratch while my husband took my work, put it in his presentations and told the world it was his. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Ben Carter looked like he was going to be sick. Victoria Vance, however, was watching Mark's destruction with undisguised, rapturous glee. She's lying. Mark tried again, but the words were hollow. Everyone in the room could see the truth. It was in Mark's panic and in Lily's terrifying calm. Mr. Vance, Lily continued, turning back to the billionaire. My husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, is correct about one thing. He is the head of his division, and in that role, he is guilty of the most egregious corporate fraud in your company's history. He didn't just take credit, he actively suppressed the asset. Me. She then did something that sealed Mark's fate forever. She walked over to the grand piano. Sitting on top of it was Mark's briefcase, which he'd left there when he went to schmooze. Mark always liked to be prepared, Lily said. He has a copy of the full Helios source code on a hard drive in here. He likes to carry it around. It makes him feel important. Before Mark could move, she'd clicked the briefcase open and retrieved a small silver hard drive. The code on this drive, she said, holding it up, is a copy. But the original code, the master file, is not on Aperture's servers. It never was. Aperture has been running a beta build for 2 years. The final optimized and infinitely more powerful version, she smiled, is on a secure server keyed to my biometrics in a vault in Switzerland. What Aperture has is a toy. What I have is the weapon. Julian Vance actually laughed, a single sharp bark of delight. Mark Thorne didn't just steal the code. He'd stolen it badly. He didn't even have the real thing. You, Mark spluttered, lunging for the hard drive. You bitch, I'll kill you! He never made it. Julian Vance's bodyguard, a mountain of a man who had been standing silently by the door, moved with impossible speed. He grabbed Mark's arm, spun him around, and pinned him against the piano with a sickening thud. Don't move! The bodyguard growled. The party was over. The silence that followed was absolute. The guests stood frozen champagne glasses halfway to their mouths, witnesses to the most brutal corporate execution they had ever seen. Lily calmly walked over to Mark, who was struggling uselessly in the bodyguard's grip, his face pressed into the piano keys. She looked down at him. This is the part you never understood, Mark, she said, her voice conversational, as if explaining a difficult concept to a child. You thought the code was the asset, but the code is just data. I am the asset, the person who can create the code, and you tried to make her serve drinks. She looked up at the stunned crowd. Her eyes found Ben Carter, the board member. Ben, she said. He flinched. You were about to recommend this man for COO. You and the rest of the board have been shareholders in a company whose sole multi-billion-dollar asset was not only stolen, but was being systematically abused and humiliated by your star executive. You didn't just fail in your due diligence. You failed to see the genius right in front of you because she was wearing an apron. Ben Carter's face went purple. He had no answer. Then Julian Vance stepped forward, his eyes gleaming. He gently took the silver hard drive from Lily's hand. Ms. Thorne, he said, his voice full of a new, profound respect. I came here tonight to find Codex. I was prepared to offer Codex a position as the head of my new R&D division at Vance Capital. A $10 million signing bonus and complete autonomy. Mark, his face still smashed against the piano, let out a strangled sob. Lily considered the offer. That's a very generous offer, Mr. Vance. But, he prompted, knowing there was a but. But it's not enough, Lily said simply. Vance raised an eyebrow. Go on. Your $10 million is a nice gesture, but the Helios patent, the real one, is worth conservative estimates of $50 billion over the next decade. I am not giving that up for a signing bonus. She laid out her terms, her voice as crisp and precise as her code. First, you will not be filing an injunction against Aperture. You will be initiating a hostile takeover. Your firm will buy out the board starting tonight. Your niece, she nodded to a pale-faced Victoria, can help you. I'm sure she'd be happy to. You will install a new board, and I will be its chairperson. Second Mark Thorne, she said, looking at the top of her husband's head, will be fired. Publicly. For cause. You will file a civil suit against him for corporate fraud and misrepresentation. You will take everything from him. This house, his cars, his stock options. You will leave him with nothing but the suit he's wearing. I want him to know what nothing truly feels like. Third, she continued, I will not be head of R&D. I will be the chief technology officer and majority shareholder of the new Aperture Technologies. My signing bonus will be a 51% stake in the company I just saved. The real Helios code will be transferred from my vault to Aperture's servers only when the ink is dry. She held his gaze. That is my offer. You get me? You get Helios and you get to clean house. Or I walk. I take my code to your biggest competitor by morning. Your choice. Julian Vance stared at her. The entire room held its breath. Mark had stopped struggling, realizing he was no longer a player in his own life. He was just collateral. Finally, Vance extended his hand. Ms. Thorne, you are a terrifyingly brilliant woman. I accept. Welcome to the company, Madam Chairperson. As Lily shook his hand, a strange thing happened. Julian Vance, a man who commanded presidents and kings, was standing. As a sign of respect, Ben Carter, the board member, slowly, shakily got to his feet. Then another executive stood, and another. One by one, every guest in the room, the colleagues who had pitied her, the rivals who had mocked her, the board members who had ignored her, stood up. They weren't standing for the wife. They weren't standing for the help. They were standing for Codex. They were standing for the new queen. The room was filled with the sound of scraping chairs and a new tense silence. It was the sound of a power shift so sudden and so total that no one dared to speak. Lily surveyed the room. She saw the fear in Ben Carter's eyes, the calculating respect in Victoria's, and the abject terror in the faces of Mark's other sycophants. They were all already repositioning themselves, their minds racing to figure out how to survive this new regime. Her regime. Mr. Vance. Lily said, her voice now possessing an effortless authority. I believe you have my husband. Vance nodded to his bodyguard. The large man hauled Mark to his feet. The fight was gone from him. He was a hollow shell, his expensive suit rumpled his face, slick with sweat and tears. Lily, he whispered, his voice broken. Please, don't do this. We're married. The house, the money, it's half mine. You can't. Lily allowed herself one last, cold look at the man she had once loved. You're mistaken, Mark. You made that very clear to me yourself, just this morning. You said you bought the house. You made the money. You put everything in a separate trust 2 years ago. A trust I couldn't touch. She turned to Vance. A trust I'm sure your lawyers will find was funded by fraudulent earnings, making it ripe for seizure. You wanted everything to be yours, Mark. And now, it is. All the liability. All the fraud. It's all yours. The brilliance of her long-term planning settled on the room. She hadn't just been a coder, she had been a prisoner, and prisoners have nothing but time to plan their escape. She had let him build his own trap. As for us being married, Lily continued, I had my lawyer file for divorce this afternoon. The petition was filed at 4:00 p.m. She checked her watch. He should be serving you with the papers. Right about now. On cue, the doorbell rang. The party guests parted as a confused-looking man in a suit stood at the door holding a thick manila envelope. "Mark Thorne?" the man asked. The bodyguard shoved Mark forward. The man placed the envelope in Mark's limp hand. "You've been served." It was the final, devastating blow, a master stroke of timing. You planned this," Mark breathed, staring at the envelope. "The party. You knew Vance was coming." "No," Lily said. "I didn't know he was coming. That was just a bonus." She picked up the crumpled, "Hello, my name is" sticker from the silver tray where Victoria had dropped it. "I planned this the moment you handed me that apron. You gave me the one thing I didn't have the rage. You wanted to humiliate me into submission, but instead, you humiliated me into action. You should have known better, Mark. You don't hand a weapon to the person who built your arsenal." She turned away from him, her business with him concluded. He was no longer her problem. He was Julian Vance's problem. "Mr. Vance," she said, "my lawyers will be at your office at 8:00 a.m. to finalize the details. I trust you and your associate can handle the cleanup here." "With pleasure, Ms. Thorne," Vance replied, his smile genuine. Lily looked at the guests, who were still standing, watching her with a mixture of awe and terror. "The party's over," she announced. "Please see yourselves out. And Ben." Ben Carter jumped. "Yes, Miss Thorne. Arrange a full board meeting for 10:00 a.m. I want everyone's resignation on my desk before the meeting starts. They can reapply for their positions. To me. That is all." She walked to the front door, pausing only to retrieve her coat from the closet. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her back. She stepped out into the cool night air, alone, free, and in control. The sound of Julian Vance's voice boomed from inside the house. "Mark, sit down. We need to discuss the terms of your surrender." But it already sounded very, very far away. Lily Thorne, the waitress, the mousy wife, was gone. Codex was just getting started. The 3 months that followed the party were not a victory lap. They were a war. The carcass of the old Aperture Technologies was rotten, and Lily Thorne, with Julian Vance's billions and Victoria Vance's ruthless efficiency, was tasked with the autopsy and the resurrection. It began the very next morning, at the 10:00 a.m. board meeting she had called. The long, polished mahogany table was full. The same executives who had watched her serve drinks now sat with their hands, folded, their faces pale. Ben Carter, at the head of the table, attempted a weak, conciliatory smile as Lily entered. She was not wearing a crimson power suit. She was wearing a simple dark grey turtleneck and slacks. She looked like an engineer, which to them was the most terrifying thing of all. She was flanked by Julian, and to everyone's shock, Victoria. "Good morning," Lily said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. She remained standing. "I see you all brought your resignations." "Thank you." Ben Carter cleared his throat. "Lily Ms. Thorne, on behalf of the board, I want to say that we are appalled by Mark's deception. We are prepared to offer you a comprehensive package to make amends, and we hope you will consider staying on to guide the Helios." "Stop," Lily said. "It wasn't a request. You're talking again, Ben, and you're posturing, just like Mark." The colour drained from Ben's face. "You're all fired," Lily stated simply. "Your resignations are accepted effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Your severance will be the legal minimum. Your stock options are void, as they were granted, based on fraudulent corporate performance. A man down the table, a VP of sales, sputtered. You can't do this. We have contracts. You have contracts based on a lie. Julian Vance interjected, his voice a low growl. You were complicit through sheer willful incompetence. You celebrated the face and never once asked to meet the architect. Your stock was worthless yesterday. The only reason it has any value today is because he gestured to Lily, is feeling generous. So I suggest you take your little box of desk photos and you leave. The room was silent. Now, Lily continued, 2 of you will be staying. Ben. Victoria. Victoria nodded, expecting this. Ben looked up, a pathetic flicker of hope in his eyes. Victoria Vance. Lily announced, is the new Chief Operating Officer. She is the only person in this room who was smart enough to know Mark was a fraud, even if she benefited from the chaos. I respect that. She will handle the business, I will handle the technology. She then turned her full cold attention to Ben Carter. And you, Ben, you are the perfect embodiment of the old aperture, all talk, no substance. But you are connected. You know where the bodies are buried. I'll do anything, he whispered. I know, Lily said. You will not be an executive. You will not have a corner office. You will be in charge of legacy accounts. Your job is to travel the country, hat in hand, and personally apologize to every client Mark lied to. You will manage the transition. You will be polite. You will absorb their anger. And you will report directly to Ms. Vance. It is a humiliating, grinding, thankless job, but it is the only one you are qualified for. Do you accept? It was a fate worse than being fired. It was purgatory. Yes, Ben said, his voice a rasp. Yes, Miss Thorne. Good. The rest of you get out. The next 90 days were a blur of 20-hour work days. Lily lived in the office, sleeping on a cot in the server room she had claimed as her new headquarters. She didn't just fire the sycophants. She surgically dismantled the toxic sales-driven culture Mark had built. She found the real engineers, the ones Mark had marginalized, the ones he'd stolen small ideas from, the ones who had been toiling in the basement on low-priority projects. Her first act was to triple their salaries and give them equity. Her second was to bring them all into a conference room, slide a pizza box onto the table and say, Helios 1.0 was a toy. I want to build the real thing. I can't do it alone. Who is in? They would have followed her into a volcano. There were battles. Victoria, as the new COO, was pragmatic and aggressive. She clashed with Lily constantly. The launch has to be in 60 days, Lily. Victoria insisted, storming into the server room, a tablet in her hand. The market is hungry. Our competitors are smelling blood. We have to show strength. The predictive algorithm is still drifting by 0.2%. Lily said, not looking up from her screen, her fingers a blur. It's sloppy. We launch when it's perfect. We don't need perfect, we need now, Victoria argued. You're an engineer, Lily, but I'm a businesswoman. We will lose this company if you stay in your sandbox. Lily stopped typing. She spun in her chair. You are a businesswoman, Victoria. I am the asset. You want to sell something. I want to build something that cannot be sold, only licensed. We are not launching a product. We are launching a standard. It has to be unbreachable. It has to be flawless. It needs another 30 days. We don't have 30 days. Then buy them for me, Lily said simply. Victoria stared at her. The sheer, unshakable confidence was infuriating and intoxicating. She finally let out a sharp laugh. You're a shark, Lily, a quiet one. You just swim in deeper water. And you, Victoria, Lily replied, turning back to her screen, are loud. Now please be loud in the marketing department and let me work. Victoria left fuming, but she bought Lily the 30 days, and Mark's fate was a swift, silent execution. Julian Vance's lawyers had invoked the fraud and morality clauses in his contract. The trust he had so carefully built to shield his assets was seized as the direct proceeds of a criminal enterprise. The house, the cars, the stocks, all clawed back. He was last seen in the lobby of a high-powered law firm, begging for representation pro bono. He was in the end exactly what Lily had called him, a footnote. Then launch day arrived. The convention hall in San Francisco was packed. Thousands of journalists, investors, analysts, and competitors had come to see the train wreck. They had come to see Mark Thorne's folly burn. Lily stood backstage. For a second, the old fear returned. The feeling of being the mousy girl, the help. She could feel the weight of thousands of eyes. Victoria came up behind her. "They're sharpening their knives out there," she said, not unkindly. "I know," Lily whispered. "Good." Victoria said, a predatory glint in her eye. "Don't just win, Lily. Annihilate them. Leave no survivors." Lily looked at her, and a slow, cold smile touched her lips. She nodded. She walked onto the stage. The crimson suit was a deliberate choice. It was the color of a warning. The murmuring of the crowd died. "For 3 years," she began, her voice ringing with a calm, digital precision. "You have been told a story about a man named Mark Thorne, a story of a flash of inspiration at 3 a.m, a story of a lone, charismatic genius." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "That story was a lie. A very good piece of marketing, but a lie nonetheless. Genius is not a flash. It is not charismatic. Genius is work. It is 18-hour days. It is 1,000,000 lines of code. It is the quiet, thankless, invisible persistence of the person who actually builds the thing." She walked to the center of the stage. "My name is Lily Thorne. I am the creator of Helios, and I was told my place was in the shadows. I was told to be invisible. I was told to be useful." She let that word hang in the air. "But the funny thing about shadows is, that's where all the real work gets done. My predecessor sold you a product, a good one to be sure, but it was a beta build, a toy. He was a salesman. I am an architect." The massive screen behind her lit up. It wasn't a logo. It wasn't a product shot. It was a flowing, beautiful, terrifying river of glowing green code, and at its center, the elegant, unmistakable Codex signature. "This," she announced, "is Helios 2.0. This is the real thing, and it is not for sale." The room erupted. It was a shockwave. She proceeded to give a 40-minute, technically dense and utterly spellbinding presentation. She didn't use marketing slogans. She showed them the code. She ran live real-time analytics. She showed them how her algorithm had predicted the last 3 micro-recessions to the day. She showed them the unbreachable security. By the time she was done, the audience was on its feet, not in polite applause. It was a roar. Later that night, the launch party was in full swing in the new Aperture headquarters. The old stuffy mansion had been sold. The new office was an open-plan warehouse, all steel glass and whiteboards, buzzing with the energy of the engineers, her engineers who were now the rock stars. Lily was in her office, a simple glass-walled room, watching them celebrate. There was a frantic knock on her door. A young intern, a brilliant coder from Stanford named Sarah, peeked in her face, pale with panic. "Ms. Thorne, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Lily looked up. "Breathe, Sarah. What is it?" "The catering," she stammered on the verge of tears. "The main order. I was in charge of it. They sent the wrong appetizers. They sent the shellfish." I know Mr. Carter's old hospitality memo said shellfish allergies are a Class A liability, and that it's a fireable offense, and, oh God, the investors are all here. I've ruined everything. Lily stared at her. The intern was trembling, ready to have her career end on her first big night. Slowly, Lily stood up. She walked over to Sarah, and to the intern's shock, put a steadying hand on her shoulder. First, Lily said, her voice soft but firm, you will never ever apologize for a canapé again. Not in this company. Second, Ben Carter's memos are irrelevant. She smiled a small, genuine smile. It's just food, Sarah. It's not a crisis. But what do I do? You're an engineer, aren't you? Lily asked. Sarah nodded. Then you know a crisis is a bug in the system, a failed protocol. This is just an appetizer, so we'll write a patch. Lily walked with Sarah out into the main party. She found the panicked catering manager. There's been a simple mix-up, Lily said calmly. It's fine. Send the bill to my office, and please add a 20% tip for your staff's hard work. The manager stared, relieved. Lily then turned to Sarah. Now for the patch. She pulled out her phone, opened a delivery app, and ordered 30 pizzas. The investors are here for the code, Sarah, Lily said, putting her phone away. The engineers will be thrilled to get pizza, and any investor who complains about not getting a tiny shrimp on a piece of toast is not an investor I'm interested in. Sarah looked at her, her eyes wide with a dawning realization. Thank you, Miss Thorne. Go on, Lily said. Your brain is the most valuable asset in this room. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small over something so trivial. Now go join your team. You've earned it. As the intern hurried off, a new sense of confidence in her step, Lily looked out over the company she had built. The sound of her engineers laughing as the pizza arrived was more satisfying than any applause. She thought about the black apron, the spilled wine, the crushing weight of the silver tray. They were memories, but they were no longer chains. They were fuel. She had been freed from her cage, but she knew her real work was just beginning, ensuring no other genius would ever be forced into one again. Lily Thorne turned from the party, walked back to her office, and got back to work. She was, after all, an architect, and she had new worlds to build. That night, Lily learned a powerful lesson. Your value isn't determined by what people call you, but by what you build. Mark tried to reduce her to a servant, but he forgot that the person who builds the house knows exactly where all the weak points are. She wasn't just the help. She was the architect of his entire life, and she was the only one who knew how to tear it all down. What did you think of Lily's story? Do you think Mark got what he deserved? What would you have done if you were in her shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you loved this story and want to hear more tales of epic revenge and karma, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own power. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a single story.